After 10 years of genre-bending solo albums and provocative musical collaborations, Elvis Costello has gotten the band back together. Just don't call it rock and roll. My review of Look Now is coming up next on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name's Kyle, and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today, and if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so that you won't miss future reviews and more. You know, it's kind of funny. From the tone we've seen in Elvis Costello's recent interviews around the release of his latest album, you'd think he might be returning to the kind of angry and abrasive pop-punk songs of his early years. In reality, that couldn't be farther from the truth, although he's taken on somewhat of a, shall we say, cantankerous tone in talking about his new album. The music itself finds the man in a decidedly sentimental mood. To be fair, I know I'm actually guilty of stoking the flames a bit. Back in July, you may have seen my video announcing Elvis Costello's reunion with his band The Imposters for the album Look Now. Perhaps a bit impulsively, I suggested that this would be his return to rock music after 10 years of experimenting with other musical genres. Mr. Costello took umbrage at my comment, though, smacking me down on Twitter, saying it had nothing to do with rock. Now, I can assure you, I was in no way looking to create a Twitter beef with one of my most respected musical artists, so I was a bit surprised by the man's reaction, and that even Variety magazine made reference to it in their announcement of the album. Now that Costello has been hitting the interview circuit hard to promote the new album, and indeed we've finally heard all the new music, I think we all have a better insight into why he'd been so defensive. By design, Look Now is primarily a tribute to the blue-eyed soul sound of iconic British singer Dusty Springfield. It's a collection of 60s throwback pop songs, even featuring writing collaborations with two of the greatest songwriters of that era. So, in spite of the fact that the Imposters share the bill, the sound on Look Now is pretty far from their last official appearance, the decidedly more rock and roll album Momofuku back in 2008. Elvis Costello is clearly quite proud of that unique direction, and he's taken great pains to reinforce that distinction in recent interviews. It's also worth noting that he's made it clear that he thinks the coverage of his cancer scare earlier this year was wildly overblown. In fact, I believe I read one comment where he said something like he wanted to punch in the face the next journalist that said he'd beaten cancer. Okay then, the man's healthy. Let's leave it at that. Honestly though, if you hadn't heard rumors to the contrary, there's nothing on Look Now that would make you think that Elvis Costello is anything but at the top of his game. I'm not sure it's fair to say his voice is as strong as ever, but he's certainly very wise about how he uses it. What you won't hear as much of on this album, though, is Costello's other instrument, the guitar. Again, he's going for more of a 60s pop sound here, so on many tracks, it's the piano and keyboards that tend to be at the center of the melody. As usual, longtime Costello keyboardist Steve Naive is spectacular throughout. I'm always pleased when he's given a chance to really play in the spotlight as he is here. Now that being said, he does get upstage on a pair of tracks featuring the legendary Burt Bacharach on piano. Both Don't Look Now and Photographs Can Lie were co-written with Bacharach. In fact, if you're a big fan of that pair's 1998 album, Painted from Memory, which I most definitely was, these songs will unquestionably be album highlights for you. And even though Bacharach only co-wrote one additional song on the album, the closing track, He's Given Me Things, his musical influence is all over this record. I mean, I'm not sure how you can craft a tribute to that era and that sound without drawing on the music of Burt Bacharach. For example, on Why Won't Heaven Help Me, Costello seems to borrow heavily from Bacharach's Dionne Warwick classic, I Say a Little Prayer, so much so that you're surprised when the melody doesn't go where you expect it will. Of course, much has been made about the other legendary songwriter with a credit on this album, and that's the incomparable Carole King. Burnt Sugar Is So Bitter definitely bears her stamp, particularly on the chorus. Oddly enough, though, I think you'll also get a strong Steely Dan vibe from the song. That's a decidedly different feeling than Dusty Springfield, to be sure, but Costello definitely makes it work here. I'm also feeling like I hear a bit of a musical influence from one of Costello's other past musical collaborators, the legendary Paul McCartney. There's little bits of Paul throughout the album, I think, but I hear it most on the song I Let the Sun Go Down. This is a track that I could absolutely have heard McCartney recording, and even including on his most recent album. All of which makes me think, hey, aren't we overdue for a Costello-McCartney reunion? I mean, after 20 years, we're getting new Costello backrack songs here, so it could happen, right? In any case, there's still a few songs where I'm left feeling a little underwhelmed. One of those is the overly long opening track and first single from the album, Under Lime. At half its length, it still would have been just okay, but at 5.5 minutes, it simply wears out its welcome for me. Later on Dishonor to the Stars, we get a song that feels like it never manages to make any real impact, melodically or lyrically. For me, it's easily the most forgettable track on the album. And if I do have a general complaint about the album as a whole, it's that it doesn't seem like any of the songs really stand up and demand to be heard. There's a lack of real hooks on this album. No songs that are likely to get stuck in your head hours after the album ends. Now that being said, what Costello has created with Look Now is a remarkably cohesive and consistent listening experience. This is an album in the classic sense. These songs are at their best when listened to as a whole. Other than possibly adding the Burt Bacharach songs to a playlist with the old Painted from Memory tracks, I don't see myself pulling out any of the other songs on their own. They belong together from start to finish, almost like a concept album. Something I find very interesting about that cohesiveness, though, is the fact that several of the songs on this album have actually been around for years. Take the song Unwanted Number, for example. That's a song that was originally recorded by another group for the 1996 film Grace of My Heart. Similarly, both the Carole King collaboration and the current single Suspect My Tears have been around almost as long, but never recorded until now. Younger by comparison, but still not technically new compositions, both Stripping Paper and He's Given Me Things date back to 2014. Hard to say why it took so long for some of these tracks to find a home on an album, but you'd never know that they weren't part of the same, creative writing sessions based on how they all sound together here on Look Now. Again, everything feels very much like it belongs together. Now, before I wrap up, I want to mention the 2-disc deluxe edition of Look Now that is also available. With that version, you get 4 more tracks, at least 3 of which I really enjoyed, those being Isabel in Tears, Adieu Paris, and You Shouldn't Look at Me That Way. Each of those are very good songs that I think not only complement the album as a whole, but could arguably stand out as some of the best tracks. I'm sure most Elvis Costello fans are probably going to go for the deluxe edition anyway, but just let it be said, if you're on the fence, it is definitely worth the upgrade. So I'm happy to say that even after the man himself gave me a social media smackdown for calling his new album rock music, there's certainly no hard feelings on my part. Look Now is a brilliantly crafted ode to a specific era of pop music from the past. And really, would you expect any less from Elvis Costello? And although I do wish that the individual songs had a bit more staying power in terms of hooks or irresistible melodies, this is still a collection where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. In an age of playlists and lyric videos, it's so refreshing to hear a song cycle that makes up a real album for a change, no matter what genre of music it may be. So I'm giving Look Now by Elvis Costello and the Imposters an X rating of 8 out of 10. It's one of the best albums of 2018 and certainly some of my favorite Elvis Costello music to come out in years. Once again, my name's Kyle and this has been Track by Track. If you liked this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, plus check out some of these other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to subscribe because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you next time.